Hi, everyone. Welcome to our event tonight. We'll be starting in just a minute. We're letting people in now. Feel free to chat in the, put your name, who you are, where you're from in the city or a group that you're connected with in the chat. We are keeping the audio off for participants for the main part of the presentation. When we come to the question period, you'll be able to put questions in the chat. And when we go into breakout rooms, you'll be able to discuss with other people in the breakout room and ask questions directly of the facilitators in the breakouts. And we aren't doing groups until 8:30. So the first hour and a half, we have presentations, but we will be having questions as we go along. There's a lot that we're going to cover tonight, so I will, I think, how are we doing for numbers? Pretty good, pretty good. So I think we'll start then. Okay, so my name is Lynn Adamson, and I am the co-chair of Climate Fast, and I'm also on the steering committee of the Toronto Climate Action Network. And the Toronto Climate Action Network is a member organization with something like 70 member groups in the city, and works on putting forward the climate agenda and connecting all the groups with each other. So I'm very glad to host this event tonight and also another event on Saturday together with the Toronto Climate Action Network. This one tonight was planned and prepared for primarily by Climate Fast and Climate Fast volunteers, and we're really glad to see you all tonight. I am going to just give you a bit of information, okay? So the workshop is being transcribed in real time, but the transcription may be incorrect at times, so the transcription will not be available after the workshop. The workshop is being recorded in the main Zoom room, but not in the breakout rooms. And as I said, questions can go in the chat. So for now, if you'd like to introduce yourself, please do so, your name and your group. And at any time, you can put questions in the chat. You can also put information links in the chat if you would like to. Linda is our chat monitor. She's going to keep track of the questions people have. She's also going to be our timekeeper. So we have a very full agenda tonight because there are two very important things happening at the same time at the city. This month, we have a survey process that Anne is going to speak about in just a moment that is running until the end of January. And we have a budget process that is allowing all of us who are citizens or residents in the city of Toronto to speak to the councillors or to write in to the councillors what our thoughts are about the budget and how we would like to see the budget work to promote climate in the city. We know that the current climate action plan that is running till next year is the first one from 2021 to 2025 is going to lag behind our target for 2025. So the current climate plan is not quite achieving what we need to achieve in terms of reductions. And the next climate plan from 2026 to 2030 is to take us 20% further down to a 65% reduction from the 1990 levels of emissions in our city. This may sound very technical, but it's really just a hint to us, a message to us that we need to have big, bold ideas for our next climate action plan. I'm a member of the Climate Advisory Group at the City of Toronto. That's a group that has 26 members that work with Transform TO staff. So we kind of provide some input, which is also what our member groups are going to do this month, as well as individuals put input into the city to say, these are the things that we want to see in the city for the future. So Anne is going to describe this process much more fully for you, but I wanted you to know that it is the reason why tonight is going to be very full is that we are looking at both those processes, the survey for the climate plan, the next long-term climate plan, 5 years, and also the budget. So that's much more immediate. So we will have Anne speak first, Anne Curie, who is the co-chair of Toronto Climate Action Network and also involved with For Our Kids and Climate Fast and other groups. Anne will be speaking. And we will then have Gail Fairley and Annalie Legault from Seniors for Climate Action Now talk about some of the issues that need to be examined and that we could comment on in this process. And then we will have Susan Bakshi will speak about the Wards project. She'll introduce that project. So I'm just giving you a bit of an agenda here, and then we will have Sarah Buchanan will be speaking about the budget. So then we will carry forward, but we're going to begin with a land acknowledgement. So I'm going to hand things over to Val Endicott, who's going to do the land acknowledgement for this evening. So again, welcome everyone, and over to you, Val.
Thanks. Good evening, everyone. I walk through Witchwood Park, where there's a stand of old growth red and white oaks, trees that populated these parts before settlers arrived. I often walk at sunset and notice how each branch from the thickest to the thinnest is silhouetted against the colorful sky, and I call them sky trees. And they're one of the joys of my life. I think about how there is a black oak savanna at High Park that is being stewarded by Indigenous people who teach the science of using controlled burns to regenerate the forest. Prior to European settlement, Indigenous peoples used traditional burns to care for and maintain fire-dependent ecosystems, including the black oak woodlands and savannas in High Park. The city has worked for many years now in collaboration with Indigenous Land Stewardship Circle and an elder named Henry Pitawatakot. I'm grateful that Indigenous knowledge keepers are guiding the city's care for these magnificent trees and the land that sustains them. I learned recently that Toronto has the largest Indigenous population in Ontario. It's also the traditional territory of many nations, such as the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and it is party to Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. In preparation to give this land acknowledgement, I found some interesting resources to learn more about the Indigenous history of this area. I also searched for organizations that are run by Indigenous people here in Toronto, and I encourage people to read about them, promote them, and if possible, monetarily support them. Please see the links in the chat. In closing, I feel strongly that we must keep in mind that particularly those of us of European settler descent bear the responsibility to redress the harms caused by broken promises and the attempted erasure of Indigenous people, and we must work to build right relations. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Val. Okay, so I would like to now turn the floor over to Anne to introduce the survey process.
Okay, thanks so much, Lynn. So I'm just going to share my slides. Sorry, looking for the right button. Okay, and I'll go into slideshow mode. Okay, so welcome again, everybody. Thanks for coming to this evening. A very busy evening, as Lynn indicated, where we're covering both the TCAN, the Toronto consultation process on the 2026-2030 strategy, and also looking at the budget, which just came out, and we'll be getting an excellent analysis on that from Sarah Buchanan at 8 o'clock. I'm guessing that most folks who've come to this call are familiar with the city's net zero strategy. Toronto is lucky to have one of the most ambitious climate action plans in North America, with the goal of getting to net zero by 2040, and at the same time promoting social equity and improving life and affordability for all its residents. So it's really the all-in strategy that we need that integrates social well-being across all sectors. How did we get here? We got here because we, the people, pushed for this plan. So that's why we're here tonight, because our voices on this really count and really make a difference. So it was community conversations around climate action and the need for it that really pushed for the development of the Transform TO strategy, which initially had that goal of 80% emissions reduction by 2050. And then, as many on this call will know, the climate strikes of 2018, 2019 were really transformative. So those strikes, and especially that massive action in September 2019, led shortly after, in October 2019, to the city declaring a climate emergency, increasing the ambition of its climate action plan to get to net zero by 2050, and then with ongoing public pressure, increase the ambition again to net zero by 2040. And we need this because we are, like everyone around the world, as we are now seeing, the climate crisis is accelerating, and we need to be ready for what's coming. And this is a projection of what we might be facing in Toronto. So as you can see, we can expect more extended heat waves. We can expect higher daily maximum temperatures, and we can expect rainfall, which will be much more damaging and much more significant and increase flood risks. But we are lucky to have a plan which addresses both mitigation and adaptation, and we need both. So right now, we have this great plan, but we are unfortunately not on track, and we absolutely need to get back on track. So we had the Ontario coal phase out, and again, that was people power that got that phase out, and so we secured that, and we saw our emissions dropped, our air clear, air pollution dropped. So that was a huge, huge win, and thanks to people all across Toronto pushing for that. Right now, however, our emissions are going up again. So we absolutely need to get back on track on all sectors. And a lot of that is due to the Portland's gas plant, which many of you here I know are working on the push to phase that out. And one of the pieces of our climate action plan to ramp up renewable energy will be critical to both phasing out that gas plant and getting a cleaner, healthier city. So our emissions are coming from buildings predominantly. That's the biggest source of our emissions, especially because of gas, which is used for heating our buildings, transportation, and waste. And Toronto has some very significant 2030 targets that we really would like to reach. And we're going to have to really push now to get them because we're not on track for some of those 2025 targets. So we absolutely need to ramp up to meet these 2030 targets. So some of these 2030 targets, by 2030, we should be taking, 75% of trips under 5K, walked, biked, or by transit, have 30% of our vehicles to be electric vehicles. So that's going to take a real ramping up of our cycling infrastructure, getting out of private cars and improving our transit. And there are good things coming in the budget, as Sarah will let us know when she speaks. So there are some hopeful signs there. Buildings. We want 100% of new buildings to be near zero emissions. The Toronto Green Standard has come into level 4, has come into effect. So there is definitely movement on this. So that's great. It's the existing buildings, which we really need to be paying attention to and ramping up our retrofitting programs. It's underway, but it, again, needs to be accelerated. Local renewable energy. we just mentioned that. So getting to 50% of community-wide energy to come from renewable sources, solar, wind, geothermal, waste heat recovery. Again, there is movement on this. I'm not so far from Toronto Western Hospital, which has this huge heat waste recovery, which will significantly reduce emissions from that huge hospital complex. But we need some of these developments across the city. Circular economy initiatives. Again, the city is taking action on reducing single-use plastic items, so that's great. But we need more on circular economy initiatives, particularly in larger things, buildings and demolition. And I know that Gail and Annalie are going to be talking about that more in their presentation. Green space, increasing our tree canopy. The goal is 40% by 2040 on that. But all of the benefits that green space can bring to biodiversity, for our mental health, we need this. And again, just coming back to that land acknowledgement, thinking about green space and land back as well, and pushing the city to do more with Indigenous folks and consultations there. So really reconnecting the land and doing some of that decolonial work right here in the city of Toronto. So, sorry, next slide. So Toronto right now has its own survey out. It's seeking input on the Transform TO strategy for 2030. And we'll be sharing more after this webinar and in the chat, the link for that survey. So you can do the survey as an individual or you can do the survey in a group. And we absolutely want everyone to do this survey because that shows the city councillors that people care about it. The city's survey, however, does tend to focus on individual actions. So there are two sections. There's a third section too, which is we actually succeeded in getting a third part there about what your vision for the city is. And so absolutely answer that. But the main sections focus on adaptation and mitigation and what actions you as an individual are doing in your day-to-day life. So what changes are you making to adapt to climate change? What changes are you making to deal with heat waves? And this is all important information for the city because they will learn where people are coming from, what parts of the city are being impacted by changes in the climate and some of these climate events that we're now seeing. And so that's all important information. The city needs to know that, and they need to know what barriers people are facing in adapting to climate impacts. So it does address city action as well, but the focus really is on learning from individuals what they're doing. And then similarly with mitigation, what changes, if any, have you been making in your day-to-day life to reduce your greenhouse gas emissions? So did you put solar on your house if you're lucky enough to own your own house? Are you taking transit more often? If not, why not? Are you able to bike? If not, why not? So they're also important questions to answer. But over at TCAN, we felt that it would be really helpful, to give a bit more feedback to the city on actions that the city can take. So we wanted to focus on the different sectors, and we also wanted to really highlight community benefits as well. So we have a more extensive survey. It covers these 8 areas. So transport, buildings, local renewable energy, waste reduction, green space, engagement. So what are we seeing the city do to educate, inform, engage people on different climate initiatives? What could the city be doing better? And revenue tools as well. And there's going to be the commercial parking levy is going to be coming up soon to the city. That will be a significant revenue tool that TTC Riders and Toronto Environmental Alliance have been pushing for. So that will be hugely helpful. And again, we need community voices out to support that. But there are other revenue tools that we could be thinking about as well. A congestion charge, for instance. We've just seen this brought in New York City. Other cities around the world have this, and it has really worked to reduce traffic in cities and clean the air and just make our cities more walkable, healthier places to live in. And then a big question, what's your vision? Do you have a really good idea that you want to convey to the city, to councillors about how we can really accelerate the implementation of our climate action plan in ways that benefit everyone in our communities? So what our questions on each of these sectors are: what do you see? What do you want the city to do to help reach this target? What do you see as the main barriers or opportunities? And then part B, how would action in this area affect life in your community? And if there are any drawbacks, that should be noted as well. So answers to this question will inform a TCAN report to the city. The deadline for both of these is January 31st, so the end of this month. So the links to both of these surveys will be shared, and we really hope that as many of you as possible complete these surveys. Thanks very much. And now I will hand over to Gail and Annalee. Oh, Lynn, I'll let you take it from here. I will stop sharing. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you very much, Anne. That was a great introduction to the opportunities and the challenges that are facing us in our city to act effectively on the climate. And we do have one of the leading climate plans in North America and even around the world. So, but we need to make sure it gets implemented. This is where the rubber hits the road. So I'm now going to invite Gail Fairley and Annalee Legault, who are members of Seniors for Climate Action Now, to present what they have found in their research, which is relevant for the survey and may also be relevant for budget deputations as well. So Annalee is a retired lawyer, active in a number of voluntary capacities, including SCAN, or Seniors for Climate Action Now. And Gail is also a part of Seniors for Climate Action Now. And I will just put in a plug for anyone on the call to get involved in a group, because it's a great way to make a difference. And we're happy to refer people to any group that might suit your interest to become active and involved, because this is a long-term project making these changes. So over now to Gail and Annalee.
Thank you. Thank you, Lynn. Gail and I really appreciate the opportunity to share with you what SCAN came up with in terms of our priorities for Transform TO. Can we have the next slide, please? This is who SCAN is. I won't waste our time on it. Next slide, please. So as Anne mentioned, and as many of you already know, the City of Toronto, despite its wonderful planning, is not on track to reach its target of net zero by 2040. And sadly, emissions increased by 1.5% in 2023. And sadly, we're not going to meet our 2025 goals. SCAN does agree, as I think the TCAN members do, with the Transform TO initiative and the plan. But we will really believe, and this is what we want to be deputing on, is that the city needs to face all this with a much greater sense of urgency. In fact, in our own internal consultations, we use the word audacious. Like, you just have to make audacious requests when you're talking to your councillors. Next slide, please. Gail's going to go on and talk about one of the main groups of emissions, and we'll switch back and forth between us.
Yeah. Before I get into buildings, I was just reminded, as we're talking about 230. It's only 5 years away, and 240 is 15. And if you take a look at what we've done in 15 years, it really makes you want to, I don't know, blow up. So 56% of greenhouse gas emissions are from buildings in Toronto, and there are two kinds of emissions that make that up. One is operational carbon emissions that result from heating, cooling, lighting, and powering the mechanics and systems in a building. And the second one is upfront carbon emissions. And these are all the greenhouse gases that are put into the air in the process of getting to a completed building. And they include resource extraction, transportation, refining, manufacturing, construction, installation, and once built, all the maintenance, renovation, and at the end of the building's life, demolition and disposal. Next slide, please. Next slide. Oh, sorry, I wasn't paying attention. Upfront carbon is largely unregulated and unaccounted for. Toronto is instituting a carbon budget for the city. Upfront carbon emissions will really have to be measured and included in this budget. And you can also bring a carbon budget down to a development level. So carbon budgets can be used at the building and development stage by requiring a carbon budget, including both operational and upfront carbon for each new development or building. And then you approve only buildings that are carbon neutral. This kind of plan should include benchmarks for what is permissible now with targets and timelines for what's permitted over the subsequent years. Because by 2040, we want to have at least 50% reduction in embodied carbon emissions. Demolitions should be discouraged through very high demolition fees. The greenest building is the one that is already built. Next slide. And we need to look at decarbonizing the transmission grid. Portland's gas-fired generating plant produces 12% of Toronto's peak electricity. Greenhouse gas pollution from Portland's has increased 550% since 2018. There's now a lot of community opposition to the planned expansion of Portland's. If the expansion happens, this will mean that our greenhouse gases will go up and not down. The city must invest in, promote, incentivize, and mandate non-fossil fuel energy. And one of the most accessible green energy sources is solar, and it has huge potential for the city. If we installed solar panels in parking lots and on large rooftops of all the big buildings in Toronto, we could probably supply 50 to 80% of Toronto's electricity. Solar installations are ideal for local distribution of energy and efficiency, and they don't have to be connected to the grid. Next slide, please. So this is a photo of solar installations in a parking lot. There's a lot of European countries are already doing that. France has a very ambitious plan for parking lot solar. In the last 13 years, the installed cost of solar photovoltaic fell by 86%. The cost of electricity generated from it fell 90%. The cost of utility-grade solar decreased 12% between 2020 and 2023. Next slide. The city can reduce operational greenhouse gases in buildings by imposing restrictions and regulations that prohibit and discourage, first of all, new gas hookups for heating and cooling in new builds, the replacement of gas heating and cooling systems in renovations, and a prohibition on installing new gas appliances, stoves, water heaters, that kind of thing. New York has just done this. And this is important because the methane in gas is really bad for your health. And with a stove, it's emitting methane all the time. It leaks constantly. And the city has to support retrofits to cleaner technology in rental buildings and to prioritize rental buildings in low-income areas. Next, please. Waste is responsible for 9% of our emissions. Measures the city can take to reduce waste include prioritizing reducing packaging in municipal purchasing, strengthening and expanding the single-use plastic regulations, make them mandatory and enforce them. I can't tell you how many times I go into a small greengrocer and they're still giving out plastic. Develop a plan with benchmarks to induce commercial and industrial operations to reduce, reuse, and recycle, and enforce penalties for non-compliance. We need the extended producer responsibility is coming in for waste. It will transfer responsibility for collection, processing, and recycling to the manufacturers of the products. And this program could be really very substantial in reducing waste, but it should be monitored for effectiveness because it's going to be carried out by private companies. Next slide. Construction, another issue is construction, renovation, and demolition waste. The city doesn't regulate CRD waste other than prohibiting from going into the municipal waste collection stream. It is therefore not included in the 9% waste emissions. Contractors and homeowners deal with the renovation waste privately. In Canada, 61% of all CRD waste is residential. And of that 61%, 57 is from renovations. And everybody in Toronto renovates their houses, whether it needs it or not. 63% of demolition waste is non-residential. The city should develop a plan to reduce this kind of waste with timelines and penalties for non-compliance. We should restrict demolitions or charge extremely high demolition permit fees to discourage demolition. And those fees could be reduced if waste is separated for reuse or recycling. And we need to promote lean construction, which targets quality and efficiency. Next slide. And this is a new rental building that's very close to the final stages of approval. This building is it's constructed with prefabricated panels, which is a really efficient way of doing a building. And it goes up, everything is made off-site, and then so the building goes up really quickly and is less disruptive and to the city and to traffic and to people who are trying to get through the sidewalk. That's it.
And then 35% of Toronto's GHG emissions are accounted for by transportation, i.e. the burning of gasoline and diesel fuels. Now, SCAN supports the 15-minute city model, which became quite well known during the pandemic when bizarre conspiracy theories arose about it. But all that a 15-minute city model means is an urban planning concept. It just means that most of your daily necessities and services can be reached by you by a 15-minute walk, bike ride, transit ride. That would mean work, shopping, school, leisure, healthcare. It's pretty ambitious, but it can be definitely built right into Toronto's urban planning principles. How do you do that, though? Well, you got to increase and improve mobility. People have to be able to get around in all these active ways. So we would like to see a lot more support for the TTC, poor underfunded TTC. We need really reliable and frequent service, and we need to keep the fares low. Otherwise, every time the fares go up, some people drop off the TTC. In terms of audacious asks, SCAN would suggest that transit should become free by 2030. If you don't ask, you don't get, right? What else can you do? Well, we could have express bus lanes in Toronto. A lot of cities use them, like Ottawa. We definitely have to go back to fight about our bike lanes, which unfortunately we're fighting the provincial government. We need protected bike lanes and separated. We have to keep our bicyclists safe and alive, which actually goes in with our net zero accident plan as well. And the streets have to be safe for walking. We can't forget that we need really good accessible transit structure. And I've seen a lot of subway stations are currently under construction, like High Park in Islington, to make them accessible. And we need really improved paratransit. The reality is that these larger projects are going to need money and support from the higher levels of government. Toronto does not have this money. Next slide, please. We also need a greener city for many reasons. And you know what? When you go to talk to your councillors, this is a relatively low-cost initiative. You don't have to be screaming about the money. Ample green space is really important for climate adaptation and for mitigation and just the quality of life of all Torontonians. So we need to increase the tree canopy and we need to increase the number of natural areas, i.e. not put in mega spas, for example. And SCAN supports prioritizing the low canopy neighborhoods, which tend to be the lower socioeconomic neighborhoods. When you have a greater tree canopy, it cools the city, it improves our air quality, it supports biodiversity, and it encourages people to be outside, and it helps on hot days, and it's critical for carbon absorption. We also need a review of our bylaws, because a lot of our bylaws are not really supporting growing of plants in the front yard. Our bylaws tend to support monoculture green lawns, which are not good environmentally. So we need to encourage people to be able to plant some plants, grow some food, grow them together, grow them as a neighborhood or grow them on their own, and have pollinator gardens and native plants and not have people complaining that you've got weird plants in your property. And community gardens and family farmers markets should be easily set up in different neighborhoods, and it brings communities together as well. Next slide, please. So adaptation. Well, I'm going to focus a little bit on flooding because flooding in Toronto is already a huge issue. We've all seen it. It may not be your own house, but we've all seen some pretty major floods. So what do you do about that when you've got a big city that's already been built? Well, we need to have the green standard go beyond incentives and actually require permeable surfaces, which gives the water, as you know, somewhere to go. And we need really strong stormwater management for all new builds. We could have permeable parking lots, permeable sidewalks, streetcar tracks, which a lot of them are permeable, but not in the same manner as in Europe, subway tracks, and driveways. Just type in permeable surface and you'll be amazed at what you can find online. We need to increase green spaces because they will absorb the water. Green roofs, encourage them. Rain gardens, bioswales. And we have to really look at our flood maps of Toronto, which exist, and prioritize the flood-prone areas. The building codes have to be revised to effectively address our severe climate events. We're getting more flooding and more extreme heat events. So new buildings have to be able to withstand rainfall and floods and the winds that are coming for us. There are so many nature-based solutions, which, as I said, are low-cost initiatives. By using permeable paving, we can reduce those heat island effects and produce more food and encourage people to go outside and then protect them on those really extreme heat days. Next slide, please. Toronto's also seen a huge increase already in extreme heat events. They're definitely becoming more extreme, and even if the entire world kept to our UN set goals, we're still going to surpass. We're still going to keep growing in terms of heat because we've already got so much banked heat. So Toronto should have a maximum heat bylaw to protect tenants, and that is under consideration. There are so many people who have no air conditioning at all. And if you even if you have your own air conditioning, and I don't really want to encourage an air conditioner in every single window because that leads to its own environmental issues, we have to really increase our network of resiliency hubs and cooling centers. You know, they can be in schools, churches, youth centers, clinics, libraries, and etc. But it's not only that. People don't even know they exist. There's just not enough information. We really need to educate. The city needs to educate people. There is already an apartment buildings bylaw, which probably hardly anyone ever reads. It already requires landlords to have a hot weather plan and provide an air-conditioned space in the building. And also requires a landlord to inform the tenants in the building of the availability of these services. But if you talk to tenants and ask them if they know about this, most of them don't know about it. And what good is it having resiliency hubs and cooling centers if people don't know how to get to them? So we really need improved communications. I think we need some more bylaw officers, which is not a huge cost. They should be checking all the apartments. And quite frankly, SCAN advocates free transit on the extreme heat days. Because what's the point of having a resiliency center if you can't get there? And once again, we can protect ourselves against extreme heat by greening our city. Next slide, please. But Toronto has no money. And that's the way our whole constitution works. Municipalities do not have very many powers to pass laws or to raise money. And we do need provincial approval for most revenue tools. The City of Toronto receives less than 10% of every dollar that the residents pay in taxes. So the bottom line is that Toronto cannot fund its own mitigation adaptation initiatives, and it does need federal and provincial funding, or then a change in the laws about how municipalities are created and governed. So we at SCAN, we spend a lot of time thinking about new revenue tools that don't target the poor, to be blunt, and that target sort of luxuries like, you know, large SUVs. So first of all, we certainly do support a stormwater charge on large impermeable areas, which might incentivize people to have permeable. We support the commercial parking levy that was mentioned tonight. It needs to be substantial. The city needs money, and we also need to discourage certain behaviors. We support a vehicle registration fee, particularly on SUVs to start, anything heavy, and luxury cars. And we also support a congestion tax. I know our current provincial government is actually focused on increasing driving, so this is going to be a bit of a battle. But congestion pricing already exists in Singapore, London, Stockholm, San Diego, Milan, and just now New York City, as Anne mentioned. It can be done, but it has to tie in with improved transit, right? And walkability. We need the demolition permit fees increased, and for heaven's sakes, we need to start charging Enbridge. In Ontario, Enbridge does not get charged anything at all to use the underground network of pipes to deliver gas to the customers. Councillor Diane Sachs estimates that if we could start charging an access fee, the City of Toronto could make $200 million per year from Enbridge. It's like a multi-million-dollar fossil fuel subsidy. Other provinces such as Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Nova Scotia do charge access fees. And we should really see a change to that. It's to be blunt, it's just a really quick and easy way to get more money for the city, and we need the money. Next slide, please. So thank you very much for listening to Gail and I. It has been a real pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And we're going to keep you on the screen there right now because we have an opportunity for questions. And I would say it's questions for Anne on the survey process, as well as Annalie and Gail on all of the ideas they presented. I will note that in the chat, there have been a lot of great ideas put in that could be suggested and part of a presentation, which to the city, either in our individual deputations, in our survey responses, in TCAN's, survey response that we'll do by the end of the month. It makes a difference when the staff see what you want in the surveys, because I'm on the climate advisory group, as I mentioned, and our last meeting we saw they presented some of the preliminary ideas that they were hearing from people, and that even included the congestion tax. So they're hearing, and they need to hear these things so that they can then report to the councillors that people are asking for this. So anyway, well, I'll stop talking and I'll hand it over to Linda for the moment, to Linda to give us a sense of what you're seeing in the chat and if we have any questions for our presenters so far.
Thanks, Lynn. So,
Andrew, can you put your question in the chat or comment? We're going to let you have a chance to talk to each other in the breakouts, but right now we're just going to use the chat for the questions.
okay.
Okay, Andrew, please, Andrew, you want to ask it out loud. We're not doing that right now. You could do that in the breakouts, or you can just put a little note about what your question or comment is in the chat. Anything you want to say can be there, but it's the most efficient way for us to go through as many questions as possible. We just have 5 minutes till our next presenter. So, what are you seeing there, Linda?
Well, lots of great ideas, as you suggested. Only one so far, I think, real question, which was whether there is a process for reporting businesses that still hand out plastic bags, or is there some kind of penalty? I see you shaking your head.
I do not think so. I think Toronto has a problem uh, of not having enough inspectors or people who go around checking on things. I think that's a chronic problem with a lot of things that they're trying to do. I mean, because people do what's easiest.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yes, and there's a lot of difference between what are voluntary, proposals that are recommended for businesses to follow versus mandatory ones. There's a project at Green Neighbors Network and several of the other climate organizations, student organizations, like at U of T and Toronto Environmental Alliance did, in terms of going around and talking to businesses about how they're decreasing their use of plastic and increasing other aspects, renewables. So there is work going on. Toronto Environmental Alliance, does have a staff person who focuses on waste issues. And so it'd be possible to find out more about that. I wanted to say, and mandatory is, we get more results with mandatory, especially when there is actual follow-up and fines and so forth, and it's done. But I wanted to say that I also noticed in the chat that Anita was bringing up the need for food sector, to look at the food sector. And in general, there's more of a focus on consumption emissions now than there used to be. Transform TO originally focused pretty strictly on buildings, which is the major source of emissions, transportation, the next main source of emissions, mostly from private cars, and then waste, which was 9%. And we're not doing very well on diverting waste. You can look at the multi-unit buildings and they only divert 28% of the waste that should go in the green bin. So we need a lot of work on that because the landfill's filling up and it's a problem, waste. So we need to look at that, but also the question of food. Anita, if you want, you could pop in the chat the treaty. Yes, the plant-based treaty. Put that in there and a little bit about it. People can click on and join the plant-based treaty and find out more about how to reduce your emissions from the food that you eat. So feel free to pop those links in there. It's in there now, I see. And any other thoughts about emissions reduction? We've had some fantastic ideas there.
I do have another question here, Lynn.
Go ahead.
Can you provide a bit more information on charging Enbridge an access fee? If Enbridge would had to pay $200 million to use city land for their pipes, wouldn't they simply pass that cost on to consumers, and wouldn't that arouse opposition?
Or maybe they would just move out of town and we could do solar. I don't have a lot of information on that. I know that it's no one in the province, no municipality in the province um, has the right, I think. I think the province actually said that they would get free access. I don't know whether that was in the bill or that's just the way it's come down the tubes, but other provinces cities collect a lot of money from that kind of charge. I can't remember what Edmonton gets, but I thought, oh my God, what we could do with that amount of money. It was huge.
We,
Sorry,
we,
Stan has already deputed about that at City Council. Like, it is a live issue right now.
Yeah.
Councillor Diane Sachs is a proponent of this. So it will be followed up. The city needs new revenue sources, and we all need to get gas out of our city. We need to get gas out of our buildings. We need to stop cooking with gas. We need to get the Portland's gas plant shut down. These are huge sources of emissions. Gas is absolutely huge. As I said, buildings are the majority of emissions in Toronto, but it's because of gas, the gas heating. So I'm actually going to take advantage of this moment here to put a petition in the chat that it's an action letter. You can just click and send. It's from Stand.Earth, and it's about the green development standards for new buildings in our city. The developers group called Rescom has launched a lawsuit to stop the city from having its own green development standards that are higher than the province's building code. And we think, it should be legally protected, but we also think it shouldn't be attacked. So that action letter sends a message directly to the board of directors of Rescom, asking them to do it. And as all these action letters are, you can vary the wording in the action letter, and they encourage you to do so. So your letter is unique and individual, and from you with your, we really should be outraged that anyone's trying to slow down the transition to a renewable, a sustainable future where our emissions are much lower than they have been in the past. So I think there's another question there, Linda.
I think we need to move on.
Yes, we're going to move on in just a moment. So the questions are there. If people want to try answering them in the chat, if you have some thoughts, you could, or Carol, we could pick up on that later when we have a moment. But at the moment, we're going to thank Annalie and Gail and Anne for your presentations so far. And I'm now going to turn over the microphone to Susan. Where are you, Susan? There you are. Susan Bakshi, who's a Climate Fast volunteer. She's going to introduce the Wards Project, which Climate Fast and TCAN have been initiating. She'll explain what it is and why it's important. Thank you. Go ahead, Susan.
Okay. So I'm Susan Bakshi. As Lynn said, I'm a volunteer with Climate Fast, and I have the honor tonight of introducing our latest project, the Wards Project. So during the 2024 budget discussions, it became clear to many of us that while a lot of Toronto councillors are supportive of the net zero by 2040 plan, there are a number of councillors that aren't very familiar with the plan, or they might not even understand it too well, or worst off, they might not support it. And we know that councillor support for the plan will be crucial if the city is to obtain the funding and staffing resources needed to implement the climate lens, to fund the necessary programs to achieve the targets, and to, very importantly, pressure the provincial and federal governments to act in ways that support rather than obstruct the city's climate goals. So during our 2024 strategy sessions at Climate Fast, the decision was made to focus our energy and attention on municipal governance, and in particular, Transform TO. And we decided that one tact we could take would be to build upon our successful kitchen table climate conversations and develop a program for Torontonians that want to work with and support their counselors to generate more excitement and some funding and the implementation of Transform TO. So as a result of these decisions, over the past year, Climate Fast has been building a pilot called the Wards Project. I think some of you have probably heard of it, and I know some of you on this Zoom are already involved with it. And the Wards Project is meant to be a way for constituents in each of the wards to connect with their counselors, support the counselors on occasion, and develop positive relationships and advocate for their full support of Transform TO. So we all know that if we have a climate action plan implemented, we will have a better, stronger Toronto. But perhaps the counselors and their staff may need some help identifying with the issues, or maybe they need some help in ways that helping them convey the messaging clearly and getting them out to constituents so that other Torontonians get it too. And that's where ward projects teams come in. So you are the ones that live in the ward. You know the issues, you know what your neighbors are talking about, and you can help connect the dots between many of their concerns and what's polling, like congestion, housing, affordability, food security, and how that links back to Transform TO and climate action. However, I want to stress that team members do not need to be experts on Transform TO. And while Climate Fast will be developing resources and hosting events to support Wards Project's teams as we build out the project, we feel it is just as important for counselors and their staff to hear our stories and our lived experiences as it is for them to be presented with facts and figures about climate action. We need counselors and constituents to understand that a climate strategy like Transform TO is a city livability strategy. And we really hope that many of you across the city from all the wards will join us and create this new exciting project and promote climate action in the city. So if you would like some more information on the Wards Project, or would like to get involved, or would like to share some information from your existing advocacy work, because I know many of you are already doing exactly what we're being talking about, please email us at thewardsproject@climatefast.ca, or you can fill out a form, which should be going into the chat momentarily. I also want to mention that during the breaks, Val and I will be running a session on the Wards Project where you can ask questions, offer input, and hopefully get inspired to join us and maybe ask your own audacious asks. That I love that, Annalie. I think that's fantastic. And help us get Toronto back on track for a better climate future. Thank you. And yes, I can put the.
Thank you very much, Susan. Yes, and I had put the interest form up, just a couple of comments up in the chat. And I see Stephen put a comment in wanting to have benchmarks, I think, a way to track how we're doing at the city. That's something they're trying to develop. So ask for it in the surveys. Ask for the kinds of things that you want in terms of reports from the city so we can know how we're doing, as well as putting in the ideas that we want the city to move forward with. Are there any questions for Susan about the Wards Project? We'd
There
love
is
you.
a question about who has signed up for the various wards. Someone's wondering whether anyone has signed up, anyone new has signed up for Ward 18 Willowdale.
We do have, right now that I know of, we have 3 people signed up for that ward. That is actually one of our pride. We're so proud of that ward. I know Judith Lawrence is on the call here, and they have been doing such a fabulous job inspiring their counselor to hold climate events and get climate in the newsletters. And they've just done such a fabulous job. It's a great example of the different ways the wards project can work. What's going to work in your ward isn't necessarily going to work in other people's wards with other people's counselors, isn't going to work with your counselor perhaps. So that's what we're really excited about, creating something that is ward specific so that each community will have its own culture and its own needs kind of brought to the counselor in a kind of a bespoke fashion that the constituents will have a say in developing. So if you'd like to get more information on Ward 18, you can send us an email and we can connect you to that amazing group.
Yeah. And I see that Andrew has signed up for Scarborough Rouge. If you've signed up for a ward, you can put in the chat. I really appreciate that, Andrew. There's quite a number of wards that we don't have anybody yet on the list, but now we will. We'll have Andrew for Scarborough Rouge. That's fantastic. It's mostly in Scarborough, Etobicoke, and maybe North York has various wards. We tend to have quite a few in University Rosedale, Toronto St. Paul's, certain wards, which is fabulous. We're really glad to have all those people. So feel free to add yourselves to those lists. But also, if you live in suburban parts of the city, we particularly need your advocacy and your voice.
There's one question that if you just give me a moment, I know it's 8 o'clock, but Laura's asking how this differs from GNN, and I think that's a great question. This is the climate, the words project is really like citizen lobbyists. We will be training people to advocate to their counselors about getting climate action. So it's going to be pretty focused. And there's actually a lot of GNN groups that have been doing some of the actions that we're talking about in the wards project. And so they're already organized, they have these relationships built, but they're still joining the wards project to create this citywide campaign that we're developing. So they kind of go hand in hand.
Yeah, the intention is to get people together to focus on their counselor. They may also want to meet with the MP and MPP because all levels of government have to come in to support the changes we're going to see. And they may become a Green Neighbors group. I think some will be, but we just really want to get that work going in that focus. So the project part of it is talking to your counselor between now and May about a transform TO, because in June is when the new plan will come from staff to council. Council has to pass it, and then when the next budget year comes, they have to fund it, and they have to stick behind the proposals that are there, even if they're contentious. And there will be contentious ones there that are pushed back by developers, that are pushed back by even residents groups sometimes push back against the things we want, like some are pushing back against bike lanes, as you will know. So we really need to work together to get the momentum, and we need each of the councillors' votes to be strong. So we need them to know, yes, my constituents care about it. They've even come to see me to talk about it. So I think we're going to have to leave it at that for now, Susan, but thank you very much. And we will move on. And so it's now my pleasure to welcome Sarah Buchanan, who is Campaigns Director of the Toronto Environment Alliance, and she's going to talk about climate in the budget. Thank you, Sarah. Over to you.
Hey everybody, how's it going? Yeah, I love the idea of the Words Project. I just caught the tail end of it, but I did see the sign-up sheet. So yeah, I think it's an awesome idea. I'm just gonna try to share my screen here. There we go. And okay. This thing. Okay, can everybody see that?
That looks good. Thank you.
Okay. So yeah, as Lynn mentioned, I'm the campaigns director at T at Toronto Environmental Alliance. And you may have either talked to me or heard from me or heard from Hao Sen Chong, who's our climate campaigner as well, or many other, or MA, or many other of our wonderful staff over the years. And as many of you know, we usually do a deep dive on climate and environment in the city budget every year, because we're really involved in advocating for a lot of the things that are either in here or hoping to be in here at some point in the future. And we are one of the only organizations that really focuses in on the city and its climate policies and budget and things like that. Some of the other organizations that do that are here today on this call as well. So I know I'm in really good company. So I think you've probably heard a lot about this already in the meeting, so I won't dwell too long on what are we actually talking about funding for here tonight. So as part of the city budget process, they're talking about not just climate, obviously, but funding things like garbage collection, funding things, like our water pipes and our sewers and all sorts of things. But when we talk about funding climate action, one of the big things we're talking about is funding the net zero strategy. And some of the big goals that we need that funding to move us towards are getting all buildings net zero by 2040. So this just gives you a sense of scale of what we're talking about here when we talk about what the job that this money needs to eventually do. Also 70% of trips on foot, bike, or transit, aka not in a gas car, or ideally in any car, and free, reliable transit for all. That is something that's in the modeling for the technical modeling for the net zero strategy. In order to get us to that net zero point, transit ideally would be free and really, really good. Electrifying gas, transit, heating, renewable energy from solar and wind, and 40% tree canopy also across Toronto. That is an important one in there. We're hovering just below 30 right now on tree canopy. So we'd love to see that rise a little more sharply. So I'll give you a little bit of context about the city budget this year. And I'll just tell you right off the top from the deep dives that we've done so far in our team on this year's budget, we're actually seeing some really promising climate investments, which are starting to take hold, not just in the Environment and Climate Division, which has been kind of fighting a bit of an uphill battle for many years to get Transform TO embedded in all these other city divisions. This year, we're starting to see that creep outwards, and I'll tell you a little bit more about why later. But we're also seeing, so among these like good steps and good investments that we're starting to see in Transform TO areas, we also are seeing, that same old story that the city needs to find ways to scale up those investments to actually be able to, hit those climate targets, reach those goals, do things like get every building to net zero. And let's be honest, we're just not going to be able to do that with only property taxes. That's one of the big reasons we are still fighting for revenue tools like a commercial parking levy. We are hoping to see that come, even this month to council and executive committee. We didn't see it in budget, even though it was requested to be there for budget. So that's something that we're really highlighting in our budget work this year is where is that commercial parking levy? We need those funds in order to sustain and grow the level of investment that we're seeing in climate action. And another piece of context too is just that, there's still the same old pushback on property tax increases. Always. I know it's less of an increase than last year, but there's lots of folks out there, lots of councillors who are hearing a lot from their constituents. So there are councillors who are going to be looking for areas to cut. So it is really important to show support for any new and enhanced items in the climate and environment budget that we think are really important, and just get out there and cheerlead on some of the things that are in there that we think are good, in addition to asking for what else we want. So some top climate takeaways on this budget, what's actually in there. So I mean, as I mentioned before, we need to see, we're seeing some promising new investments, but we need to see these investments get bigger. I think I repeated myself a little bit in this slide, so I'm just going to skip right through it. So what's actually included in the budget? One big thing we're seeing that is a win for the climate plan. So a really big part of reducing emissions in Toronto is just stopping burning gasoline in cars. It's not quite as big of an emitter as buildings, but it's number 2, transportation. Most of that is just from gas cars. So in order to get people out of those cars and not burning gas, we really need to have a transit system that is much faster, much more reliable, more affordable. We also need cycling networks to be better and more reliable and safer, although Doug Ford's making that a bit of a tough go right now. But we are seeing some good investments in TTC fare freeze, as well as some important service improvements, things like more frequent subway service. We're also seeing streetcar wait times decreasing on some of the major routes. So those investments will help. We want to see those continue in the future. It's not on here, but we're seeing also an expansion of the bike share program in Toronto, which has become really, really popular. It's a pretty big success story. And that is something that can actually really help people who are, maybe they don't own a bike yet and they're a bit tentative about it, but if they can use that bike share program, it can kind of pull them into biking more often. There's also some important investments for decarbonizing buildings. There's an expansion of the HELP program, which is the Home Energy Loan Program that the city runs. So they're starting a new stream of it, which is targeted towards low and middle income homeowners. And so that's really exciting because historically it's been a little bit more accessible for wealthier homeowners, but now they're starting to tailor a stream of it for folks who maybe don't want to do all the bells and whistles, but want help doing things like just installing a heat pump. And on that note, they're also launching what's called a bulk buy program for heat pumps. And that is basically what that means is like the city will buy a whole bunch of heat pumps, so they get a deal on it. And they will also, I think they'll play some sort of a role in helping either find people to help install it or recommend people for installation, which is good to simplify that process. So providing people discounts on heat pumps. So there's a program that's going to be launching on that. We don't have a ton of detail right now. And then, of course, just more staff for important programs that they're going to be bringing in, like the building emission performance standards, which council's going to be voting on later this year. Those are going to be new regulations that, if they vote yes, will be coming in to gradually make existing buildings more energy efficient. Another thing we like in here is there's more investment in greening the city fleets. So TTC buses, we're seeing more of them go electric. Garbage trucks are going hybrid. They're going to CNG, which is compressed natural gas. So not quite electric yet, but CNG. And then more cars and trucks in the city's fleet carrying around things like MLS officers are also going electric. So not all of them, but many more of them. And then we're seeing a bit more funding for green infrastructure. That's something T's been pushing for really hard, given like the flooding that we are seeing as a result of extreme weather in Toronto. We know that we need more green stuff to absorb that stormwater. It also looks really nice and it absorbs carbon, and sometimes it provides shade if there's trees in there. There's all manner of great things that green infrastructure brings. But one of those things is absorbing stormwater. So we're pushing for our streets to have more boulevards and get that pavement out of there, get that green space in there to soak up that water wherever possible, because our paved streets are really where a lot of that storm water is flowing, and it's a problem. And there's also, they're starting a pilot program for tenants in hot apartments to help them afford air conditioning, which, as we saw in BC's heat dome, which killed hundreds of people, as heat waves escalate, people who live, let's say, on the 20th floor of a building with no access to air conditioning, it's actually becoming quite dangerous for many folks. So this is a pilot program to help cut a very small chunk off of the demand for that. This is the city's slide on some of the goodies that they are providing in this year's budget. They don't have TTC on here because it's a completely separate budget, but this is just maybe like a bit of a nicer slide that shows some nice little green leaves everywhere. It's also got mention of the basement flooding protection program, which is something that Toronto Water runs. That's building out the big gray infrastructure, making sewers bigger to make sure that that stormwater that's coming down faster and harder isn't coming up in people's basements. Maybe I'll just go to the next slide here, but there are more programs and tidbits that I haven't mentioned, and I'll give you links at the end of my presentation where you can find the list of like all of the things that they're funding, and some of the things they're not funding as well. Another thing that we like this year is this is the second year of what's called the carbon budget. And I put it in air quotes because it's not like 100% like a carbon budget that that they've implemented in other cities. But what they're doing at the city, which is really necessary, is using this as a tool to embed climate action in not just environment and climate division, but divisions like Toronto Water or economic development and culture. They go around to every department and they say, what can you do this year? Can you identify, do you have any good ideas for big projects you can do to reduce emissions? And they make a big list of all the things they talk about, and then they quantify them and they sort them by priority and how good they will be at reducing emissions and how much they'll help other areas of the city. And they make a big list and they rank them, and then they choose a bunch of them to fund in the new and enhanced budget. And that's what they've done this year. And the reason that's good is because environment and climate has been sort of pushing this rock uphill for many years with Transform TO, which has needed a lot of support from other divisions, and it hasn't really gotten it. Now through this process, they're starting to like open the eyes a little bit in other divisions across the city about what's possible. And through that ranking process, they're kind of saying, okay, you're going to do these things. We are funding them. We are choosing them. So it's a start. Another thing they're doing is tagging fossil fuel reliant projects. That's something T has asked for over and over again. When this first launched, they didn't do that. And we said, hey, we've got this side where you're saying, okay, these are the things that are going to help reduce emissions, and these are good things. What are the projects that are going to make this worse? Like, we want to know about them too. Which projects are still buying old gas furnaces? Which projects are still, how much gasoline are we still buying as a city? How much are we investing in fossil fuels? So through this process, we actually have a tally now. We know exactly how much money the city is spending on fossil fuels, $50 million this year. We know exactly, which projects are still purchasing fossil fuel infrastructure. That's it's not the greatest news that they're still buying these things, but the idea is hopefully we'll see that reduce all the over time. And it also brings in a lot more transparency. So there's a link there. I'm going to pop a link to all the links in the chat when I'm done. So don't worry about having to like click on that and pull it up. And also I'll just give a brief overview of what we think is missing. The biggest thing really is a parking levy, as I mentioned, a funding source that can scale this stuff up and also protect it, because we want to see continuing investment. We don't want this to be the only year where we're saying, hey, there's some good stuff in here. Next year, we want to be saying, wow, there's even more good stuff. And, we're starting to get back on track to meet our climate goals. And to do that, we do need new funding sources. That's why we've been fighting for a parking levy. And the amount of money we're talking about is pretty large. Even the sort of refined lower estimates from the city, when they put in a bunch of exemptions, they tallied it at about 150 million per year. So when you step back, that's actually equivalent to a 3 to 4% property tax increase. And so that gives a revenue source that doesn't add to that tally, where they politically obviously can't get like if they were trying to get a 10% property tax increase through right now, that would be almost politically impossible. But having a commercial parking levy where it's a little more targeted, it's a small charge on large parking lots like mall parking lots, getting the big companies like Cadillac Fairview and Walmart to pay up essentially to invest in helping helping to fix the climate crisis. Not surprisingly, we are seeing the lobbyist registry popping off with Walmart, Cadillac, Fairview, Shell, who are now all in there lobbying against a commercial parking levy, because they don't want to pay up. But this could be a really great way to fund transit, climate action, and other city priorities. Yeah, so basically, you know, we need all of your voices to speak up on this. And I've got some tips down below here, and I think that Anne also has some awesome tips. This is my cheat sheet for points you can use in your deputations. But I would really, before you even look at this, I would just drive home the point that you really want to make it personal. So I think we can be consistent in our messages without saying the exact same thing, because, you know, I think that if we all say exactly the same thing, they start to drown it out after, or tone it out after a little while. But if you're prioritizing telling your story about why this matters to you, why you want to see, for example, bike share expansion, maybe if you've used the system or would like to use it, things like that, I'd say pick out a couple of these things that you really value and talk about why you love seeing them in the budget, or why you want to see these additional things in the budget as well. And so here's the resources for the nerds. If you aren't able to click on that, I will take those and I will actually put them in the chat. And I think Lynn is going to be sending around the slide deck afterwards. So I'm going to stop there and see if there are any questions.
Yes, do please go ahead and put questions in the chat. We don't have very much time for questions now, but we might be able to take one or two. Then I will transfer over to Anne, who's going to speak about the deputation process and how to get involved. Then we will be breaking up into groups, and that will include a group on budget deputations, and will include a group on surveys. So providing help to you to do the surveys. So please don't forget about the surveys when you go home. We really want you to fill in those surveys. Your voice is so important. And we don't really have time in the call to do it all together, but we can talk about them in the breakout groups, and we'll also have a group looking at the wards project. So you'll have that opportunity in about 10 minutes or so. But Linda, what are we seeing? Are there some, is there one or two key questions there that are for Sarah?
Yeah. So one of the questions I see is, what is the pace of retrofits and transportation model shift that we need to do to reach 20% reduction in emissions by 2030?
Yeah, I'll say that the pace, I think the pace, it was somewhere around like 127,000 homes per year. And we're talking about single family homes. Lynn's nodding. Maybe that resonates with you too. But the sort of numbers are probably less important than the fact that we are not on track to meet them. I say we, I mean, I should say like the city is not on track to meet those retrofit. The pace of retrofits that ideally they would be seeing to hit net zero. There's a number of factors there, right? I mean, again, I'll say it again, like property taxes are just not enough of a base to fund the scale of retrofits. The city itself cannot fund that kind of transition. We need federal funding. We also need new revenue tools, and we need regulation. So that's one thing that we're hoping to see. If those building emissions performance standards come in, that's actually going to bring in rules and regulations that are saying these retrofits have to happen over time at a predictable pace, probably starting with larger buildings. So right now, you know, the pace is quite slow, but there are some transformative tools coming in where we hope that'll start to ramp up. But yeah, it's pretty slow right now, I'll say.
Yep. And this is one of the things that we need to have these work groups for, is to advocate for the emissions performance standards, because there will be a bylaw come to the city, and it's important that they be mandatory for the big buildings in particular, to get the landlords to take on those projects. And it does put the costs on the building landlords, but we know that they can do these renovations in ways that do not require raising people's rent. they can fund them over a period of time. And there's businesses out there that will help a landlord to figure out that plan that will actually take it on to do the renovations to reduce the energy load of that building, the emissions load of that building. So we know that there's ways to do it, and we really need to implement those to speed things up. But we're going to need citizens to say, we want those emissions performance standards and we want them to be mandatory. So thank you so much, Sarah. That was really great. And I'd really like to hand things over to Anne now so she can, but Sarah is staying with us, so she'll be here till 9, and maybe you can pop into the budget deputations group and the survey group and answer questions, because we should be able to move you around to the different groups. So really, thank you so much, Sarah. The work that T does is such a big contribution to our city. And how long have you been there, actually? What year are you?
About 3 years, since 2021.
Yes, but the T has been doing these things for
Oh,
decades.
For
Yes,
35 years. Yeah.
5 years. And so the voice is very respected at City Hall and a wonderful part of our TCAN network. Okay, thank you, Sarah. And now over to Anne Keary.
Okay, thanks, Lynn, and thanks, Sarah. I will try to be quick. So I am going to talk about why it is so important to depute and why this really matters, because it really does make a difference. So last year we did a budget deputation training together, TCAN and Climate Fast, and we were thrilled to see so many people go out and depute at all of the different deputation locations, and this had a real impact. So Toronto Star reports on the top 5 things that residents deputed on, and climate made it onto the list. So that was amazing. Transit is also key to climate action, obviously. Affordable green housing is key to climate mitigation and adaptation and resilience. So there was a lot of good climate deputing in that last series of deputations. I'm just highlighting here that the media were there. And they were listening to people's stories, and they actually stopped and interviewed folks who had done particularly powerful personal stories. And Sarah, who is a member of For Our Kids, she spoke about how terrified she was of climate change for her children's future. The media jumped on that, and she did an interview afterwards, and her story got included in this piece in Toronto Star. So your voice really does make a difference. And your voice has already made a difference. Sarah highlighted this earlier in an email to TCAN, just noting how in the when was it? October, November, budget consultations, that first round when they had the survey about what you wanted to fund the most and where you wanted to decrease investments. So environment and climate made it all the way up to the list to 3rd place, which was a big step up from the previous year. And we also saw that climate was in the middle now of where people wanted to decrease investments, whereas the previous year it was actually one of the things, sadly, that a lot of people included as where they most wanted to decrease investments. So your voices have already made a difference. So never doubt that public pressure can move things. It can move councillors, it can move resources to where we need them to go. So probably a lot of folks on this call have already deputed, but in case you haven't, a deputation is a 5 or 3 minute speech before a council committee. If there are many people deputing, and there likely will be, they will cut it to 3 minutes. So, but it's usually around 5 minutes, which is around 700 words or so. So it's your opportunity to provide councillors with your perspective, convince them to take your thoughts, concerns, and ideas into account. You can deliver your deputation in person, and I'll get into more detail soon, or you can do it via video, and you can also make a written submission. And we encourage everyone to do both. especially if you are doing an oral deputation and you're writing it out, send that in to the budget committee clerk so it goes on the record, and send it to your councillor as well so that your councillor knows that you care. That's really important. And so these are, it's coming up. It's next week. So we need to get people out. I'll get to how to sign up shortly. So Tuesday and Wednesday. January 21st, City Hall and Scarborough Civic Centre, January 22nd, Etobicoke and North York Civic Centre. So there are three time slots, 9:30 to 12:30 in the morning, then in the afternoon, and then 6 p.m. onwards. And so that can often go quite late into the night. So be prepared if you go out there. Bring some snacks, bring some water, settle in. One of the nice things about going to do it in person is that you will see your friends there as well. And it's a nice place to kind of make connections and share some solidarity. So that's, if you have the capacity to do it, I would encourage you to do that. We will also be sharing a deputation sign up because we really would love to see people in all of these different locations. So it's really important there that councillors are hearing this in Scarborough, that they're hearing it in Etobicoke, North York, and the city. So do spread yourselves around, and we'll share the deputation sign up so that we know who's out there and can also provide support if needed. So to do this, to sign up, all of this information is on the city website, and it's also on the new TCAN city website as well. So you email the budget committee clerk at this address. We'll be sharing all of this afterwards if you don't have it as well. But you have to do this by Monday before 4:30 p.m. So that is the deadline. And I would encourage you all to do it as soon as possible, because especially if you're really keen on doing it, say in the afternoon or the morning, those spaces fill up. So do jump on this. When you do email, include your address and phone number, indicate which location and session you wish to depute at, and indicate if you'll be coming in person or if you prefer to do it online by video conference. And they will send you the link and the instructions for doing that. This is what it looks like. Thank you, Sarah. This is Sarah's slide. I really like this, just showing kind of what it looks like. There's you deputing in the center there. This is the Planning and Housing Committee, but it sort of looks similar to the Budget Committee as well. And those screens in the back, if you are deputing via video link, that's where you will appear there. Deputation tips, Sarah covered some of this as well, so I'll be brief. Write your deputation, you can practice it, and then you can really sort of make sure that you're keeping to that 5 or 3 minute time limit. If it does go to 3 minutes, which it might, figure out which lines or sections you want to cut so that you can get it to those 3 minutes. So you begin by stating your name, your ward, your occupation or organization if you're connected to one. Thank the committee for the opportunity to speak. And then, as Sarah said, make it personal. Personal stories are often the most effective. When I think of having deputed at City Hall, I remember the personal stories. I don't remember the facts or figures that people presented, but I do remember personal stories that people have told. So that really sort of brings it down. So you might say something about the global climate crisis and how city action is really important in addressing this, but then bring it down to how this affects you, your family, your community, your concern for your kids' future, the climate impacts you're seeing already, heat in schools, flooding in your basement, those things, and also what climate solutions you really want to see. So focus on your asks, and Sarah has given us some great ideas there. So many of us will be coming in to really support that commercial parking levy, support green infrastructure, support all the things we need. and speak to the benefits. Build a vision of the city you want. Get your councillors on side. Get the other people in the room on side as well. Speak to how this will improve the health and well-being of folks across the city. Be respectful. Don't insult the councillors. Don't insult the mayor. I mean, the mayor won't be there, but instead of coming right out with your objections to a particular councillor, use language like, you urge the committee to do this. You would ask the councillor to reconsider. So do be respectful. In your conclusion, restate your asks, thank the committee for the opportunity to speak, and be prepared to answer questions. Sometimes there may be a councillor who will ask a very friendly question because they want to, elicit an answer from you that will strengthen the case that they want to make. But there are sometimes councillors who are not so friendly, and I have heard that can make things challenging as well. But you're speaking from your personal experience. Hold your ground, bring it home. You know what you want, and you know what the city needs to do to accelerate and implement its climate plan. I can briefly show this clip from Chris, and what's the time? Or maybe shall I hold off on this, Lynn?
How long is it?
It's like I can show a couple seconds just for anyone who's
30 seconds. Yeah, so it's 30 seconds.
Okay, so hopefully this will work.
Hi, my name is Prasan Veerasingham from Scarborough Center. I'm a co-founder of a grassroots organization called Scarborough Environmental Association. I'm here to ask you today to not go through with the service cuts, because at a time when we need more people to take transit, if we want to reach our environmental goals, service cuts will chase people away, and increasing fares will chase people away. We all agree that we're in a climate emergency, like the city voted on it, but any sort of disruption to service, making people wait 30 minutes, that means they're going to find alternatives. And I've seen a lot of people do that over the years during COVID. And that's why we see that there's still like a 20% gap between what it was pre-pandemic.
I think that's good, Anne.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, get out there, depute. It really does make a difference, and we'll all be very grateful. So thanks.
Okay, I'll just add a couple of things. You can speak on behalf of a group. You may get formal. You may have a letter on letterhead, and you can ask for that to be put on the public record. They will not put your written comments. If you write in your written comments, if you send your submission, or sometimes people just send a letter and don't actually depute in person or on the screen. But tell them if you want that on the public record, and send it as an attachment is the easiest way. Could have your logo, etc. But it's very important for many of the submissions to simply be from ordinary folks, and from this ward, from that ward, throughout the city. It's you're speaking to the councillors, and it's a very unusual opportunity. We don't have it at other levels of government to just kind of, they hear everyone. It's not like they look at the screening, which they do at the province and the federal government. They only have selected people come. Everyone has the right to come, and you're speaking directly to the councillors, and your heart can convey to them in a way that a letter doesn't always do. But the letters are important too, and even a very short letter to your councillor and to the budget committee, buc@toronto.ca, will be counted. They will count those the points of view that they see and they hear that come in. So at that, we're going to say thank you very much, Anne, and we're going to see if we can get ourselves into groups for about 20 minutes, and then we'll come back for the last 3 or 4 minutes together at the close of the event, and we'll close up as close as we can to 9 o'clock. A very big thank you to everyone for coming, and I hope you will stay for the we maybe should put some things in the chat in case people have to leave and can't stay for the breakout of later. But we hope you will, because we have some announcements at the end. The Mayor's Town Hall, I'll try to put that in the chat, because this is where we didn't get support for the environment last year, was at the Mayor's Town Hall. There's actually one tonight, and then there's one on the 23rd, January 23rd. So if you can go, if you want to ask a question, you got to put it in right at the beginning, but they will have polls and you can say, here's where I'd like to spend more, or the city should spend less. And I'll just find it and put it in the chat, but we're also going to be putting up some options for you to choose a breakout room. So I think Mark is going to set that up for us. And hopefully we'll see you at the end. We'll do a closing photo at 9 o'clock with everybody that's been on, who wants to be on the screen for the photo. And yeah, so Mark, how are we doing with the process of setting up those groups?
Win, win, win.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. We still have over 30 people with us tonight. We had 47, I think, at maybe our peak tonight, which is really fantastic because we're also going to be having another session on Saturday. So this means lots of people are going to be speaking up. And some people have to leave. If you have to leave, that's okay. But if you could stay on for like 2 or 3 more minutes, we just have a couple of announcements we wanted to make. I wonder, Mark, if you're ready to show the slide of the vigil on Sunday, because I'll just talk about it while you see if you can find it. Climate Fast decided to organize a vigil together with Faith and Climate Action and any other groups that want to get involved. And we actually have a link where you can sign your group up. And we want people to come out and join us. That'll be on Sunday the 19th, which is actually the night before the inauguration of one of the most anti-climate president that we've ever had. So that is Sunday the 19th at 5:30 at Spadina and Bloor, the little parkette there on the southeast corner. And we'll do candle lights, like with battery candles at 6 o'clock there. And, you know, please get in touch. I'm going to put my email, or my email's there. Sorry, if you can scroll down a little bit, or maybe you can all see it. No, I can't. My email.
It's visible. It's visible.
Is it? So it's lynn@climatefast.ca. So if you want to get involved or your group does, that's great. Or just come out to that corner Sunday at 5:30 and we'll give a message that we need climate leadership. Okay, I think we have just a few more announcements to make. We were also going to put up the Climate Fast logo because we're encouraging people to consider signing up for the Climate Fast newsletter. If you're not receiving it already, comes once a month. Linda, who's on the call tonight, is our editor, does an excellent job. And we do have an event coming up on February 1st, which has to do with climate accountability of councillors. It's a new website that we're launching. It'll be launched on February 1st. We'll include that in our follow-up letter that comes from this, and it'll also be in the next Climate Fast newsletter highlighted. It'll be at the Friends Meeting House. That's a Saturday evening. I think we are at 6 o'clock. Yeah, so we hope people will join us. And I put the Mayor's Town Hall in the chat earlier on the 23rd at 7 p.m. It really, if you can, just do that from home. The link is there. Okay, I thought I had a couple more announcements here. Let me see. All right. Yeah. Okay. Oh yes, the Voting Records Project Eventbrite registration link is here. I can just put it in the chat.
It's already there.
It's there. Okay, fantastic, Linda. Thank you. And we will send a follow-up letter with, and if there's something you want to see in that follow-up letter, you know, pop it in the chat. I also wanted to mention that in Etobicoke, there will be a session on Saturday, 25th January from Etobicoke folks at 2 o'clock. And okay, that would have to be turned into a link. It's in text in my thing, and I think I'm not sure if on the Zoom you have to put it into a link. I'll remind you again about the Green Development Standards, that action letter. Very easy to do. Just click on and send that to Rescom and tell them what you think about them taking the Green Development Standards to court. It's pretty unforgivable thing in terms of our children's world. I think we're pretty good here, and I hope I haven't forgotten anything. And so we always like to, at the end, we like to thank, first of all, our volunteers for this evening, our tech team. So Mark and Ray and Sharon. We want to thank all the presenters and everyone who behind the scenes has made this possible. And we want to thank each and every one of you for coming. And we really encourage you to sign up for the Words Project so that we can continue to work on individual councillors as well as speaking to City Hall. I'm seeing some thank yous in there. That's really wonderful. And shall we do our closing photo for people who want? Yeah, we got a gallery shot here. And who's taking our photo? I can take a photo. Smile, everyone. Y'all look great. Thank you. Okay, I got a photo. As a record of what we're doing, it's quite significant. Citizen involvement is the way we're going to get there, because the staff cannot lobby the councillors. They can just work away at their report, but they can take our suggestions and work away on it. But it's a council that's got to bring forward anything contentious, that's going to put through these things and vote on it and implement it. So we're the link between the planning and the action. It's us. So, oh, I've got page 2, another photo. Hold on a second. We've got 2 lovely screens of people. I'm taking the second screen. Here we go. Smile. Thank you. Got your photo. Okay, so I think we're I don't know if you can unmute everybody and people can just say goodbye. Can you do that, Mark? Or people can wave. Really, really very grateful. We're a community and we're making this happen, you know? So thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay. Good night.
Night,
Thanks,
Jane.
everyone.
Night.
Good night.